Good evening, everyone. I am Debbie Stromberg. I am from Creator in the Clackamas area, also with Southeast Portland Youth Collective. And we are going to try to ground ourselves in the idea of encountering the land, meeting the land, getting to know the land, bringing our awareness to stories of the land. We find on one hand, the tension of land that's been commodified, often for some to have power over others. But also we find stories of land as a partnering healer. The land itself providing examples of power between and power among the many connected parts of all living things. The land and all of nature seems to guide us into shared liberation, connection, health, and the flourishing of all things. Not long ago, I learned of my connection to a hidden land story of oppression. Though the silenced community members have been trying to tell the story for 50 years, I only recently learned that in the 1960s and 70s, my beloved Lutheran faith institution was quietly complicit in the purposeful removal of a vibrant Black community near Lutheran-based Emmanuel Hospital. The hospital, which offers my denomination nearly free rent, had joined forces with the city of Portland to declare eminent domain, a law allowing the selective confiscation and bulldozing of homes and businesses in the only area of town where immigrants and the Black community had been allowed to purchase real estate. There are similar stories all over the country where wealth and subjugation have often been created through land laws enacted by those who feel entitled to or convinced of their need for power over others. We pass these laws together in our blindness to a system that prioritizes individualism over community and connection, sadly maintaining our separateness from each other and from the land. LaVeta, do you want to share the drawing? I came up with something to just help name the tensions I was holding with my beloved institution. On one hand, a beautiful fabric. There you go. A fabric that on the outside shows an organization that is full of sharing, caring, immigration help, food and housing, universities, hospitals being built. That's what I knew and that's what I loved. And the more I looked underneath, the more I realized that some of the threads that my institution was built on were privileges that were given through things like the doctrine of discovery. Basically, the Pope saying, if you're Christian, you can go conquer lands and take lands, which brought all kinds of European benefits. Also, the manifest destiny. Once the US was started, this idea that it was destined, we were destined by God, us European Christians, to take over the whole North American continent. I started realizing there's some pieces that I never really understood. And this drawing just kind of helped me put that all together. This invisible warp that I'd never seen before. Even as we grapple with the uncovering of these hidden stories of abuse of the land, there are discoveries bubbling up everywhere, especially through wise Indigenous voices, encouraging our increased awareness, really paying attention to the land and all of the natural systems as a guide for bringing healing and wholeness and connectedness. The Franciscan priest Richard Rohr often refers to creation as the first Bible, the first revelation, and even the first incarnation of the divine. Many of us are finding sacred grounding in nature and noticing deeper peace in ourselves when we pay attention to the incredible interplay of all natural living systems. LaVeta, you can take that one down, and I'm going to invite everyone to just think of a sacred place, a sacred land. What land is sacred to you? What natural spaces are you drawn to? And just go ahead and share that in the chat. And if you'd like maybe qualities that convey the divine, either just list the places that are sacred to you, that really reveal the divine to you, and or places, the ways that that reveals the divine. And go ahead and just share those in the chat. Any place to see squirrels, Silver Creek Falls, the waters of life. I love it. The Salish Sea, Puget, the original name for Puget Sound. The coming and going of waters and waves, the meeting of water and earth on the shoreline. Any forest, the Blue Ridge Mountains, alive with spirit and long, long human dwelling. Whitaker Ponds, story of harm, repair, transformation, regeneration, beautiful images of the divine. The beach, the Sierra Nevadas, Columbia Gorge, Columbia River, Salmon River. Continue to put your sacred spaces into the chat, and how it reveals the divine to you, and continue just watching those. And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask LaVeta to put up a picture of one of the sacred spaces for my husband and I. My husband is a beekeeper. We share our land with about 800,000 bees. We learn about thriving communities every day. We are constantly inspired by watching each individual honeybee with its particular role that contributes to the flourishing of some of the hive as a whole. You can see up in the corner, we have an indoor hive as well that we love to show people how the inner workings of the bees work. And then Paula constantly is bringing people out to see the hives and show the different types of hives and pull out the bees on the comb. And then you can see down in the corner a giant swarm that he takes calls from around the area to go catch swarms. And this was a particularly big swarm. There's just such a beauty in the interplay of the bees, not just for the health of their own community, but of course for the interconnected health of the land and of our food systems, and therefore all of us. LaVeta, go ahead and bring up the next slide. And I invite everyone into just a couple minutes of just some deep breaths in and out, looking at the interconnectedness of these swarms, the hives, the bees, who all have a role. They all have their job that is all for the good of the whole. Their focus every day is the good of the hive, the good of the whole, the good of the whole community, which therefore affects us. So breathe in the sense of interconnectedness, the sense of how we care for the creatures that care for the land, that care for the plants, that care for us. This cycle that comes and comes. Go ahead, LaVeta, on to the next slide. The individual integrity, taking what they love to do and just doing it with their whole heart. We mourn that we've not been better trained to take notice and pay attention, which has kept us separate from each other and from the land. And we mourn our complicity in the commodification of the land that only benefits some. But we also give deep gratitude for examples of bees and trees and flowers of the land who teach us about connection and life-giving strength and relational power. We realize also that we are guests on this land, and we give gratitude for the indigenous ancestors who have for thousands of years cared for this land and continue to show us how to live in deep connection with the land. We recognize the Clackamas, Cascades, and Tumwater bands of the Chinook, the Tualatin and Pudding River bands of the Kalapuya and Northern Malala people, the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, and so many others who made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. May we continue to learn from all of these wisdom keepers a deeper journey toward listening, noticing, and encountering the land. And now I will pass it over to Sarah.
My name is Sarah Loze. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the heartbeat holder for our Multnomah County West cohort. And one of the reasons that I do this work is because of my kiddos, my 6-year-old Tovik and my 9-year-old AJ. And I see how deep a connection they already have or haven't yet lost with the land, and how much delight and joy they find in the land and in the trees in our front yard, and the woodpeckers that visit our suet feeder, and in the leaves that are falling, and the raindrops, so many raindrops falling right now. And I want them to have the chance and the opportunity as adults to continue to enjoy and to encounter that beauty. And I believe that the practices of sacred organizing that we are learning and engaging in together here, that process that Brett mentioned before of building and exercising our collective power to bring into being a world where life can flourish for all, is one way to help ensure that that's possible for my kiddos. Tonight, I am here to explore with you what we mean by land encounter. And LaVeta, if you want to put up the slide of the sacred organizing spiral, we're going to explore how we might begin to practice that in our lives, in our communities, in our organizing. But first, I just want to kind of remind us of where we've been so far as a coalition and as our cohort communities and how we got here. So each quarter of our cohort cycle or year, we're focusing on a different beat, right, in the sacred organizing spiral. And this first quarter, we've been looking at sacred encounter. And this month is our last, where we'll be focusing specifically on sacred encounter, which we define as listening that invites relationship. I'll say it again, listening that invites relationship. And I think it was in October with Chris de la Cruz that we focused on how to invite sacred encounter with one another, with our fellow community members and human neighbors, particularly through that practice of one-to-one conversations. And then last month, Melissa and Anna and Story, and I remember threads and yarn and whiteboards and flip chart paper. The three of them helped walk us through that process of how we start to thread and connect those stories, individual stories that we're hearing, into a collective narrative or a story about the common pressures that we face and the dreams that we share. And today, we're going to explore what it means to invite a sacred encounter with the land, to listen in a way that invites relationship with the land that sustains us, the land we belong to, or at least seek to belong to, the land that we steward, the land where we work, worship, play, and make life together. But I want to maybe clarify first the way that I'm using land, that we are using land tonight in this conversation. And it's kind of as a shorthand for a lot, for water, for wetlands, for soil, for plants and air and animals and minerals and mountains, all of our non-human or more than human neighbors, both animate and inanimate, or maybe somewhere in between. Maybe those lines are less binary than we think. But That's huge, right? That's so big. That's so much. And I think that's one of the reasons why maybe the theologian Ched Myers has developed this notion of watershed discipleship. And LaVeta, I wonder if you might pull up the next slide on watersheds. Ched Myers encourages us to learn and love and act at the scale of our watershed. So not just our individual like church tract of land that it's on, and maybe not the entire planet. Maybe we're not going to be able to have a sacred encounter with the whole world, all of it, the universe, or maybe we will. But what does it mean to think about a more manageable kind of scale in which to really learn and love and act? And a watershed, in case that's a newer concept for you, I know it took a little bit of like exploration for me to learn, is this idea of an area of land where all the water that is under it, the groundwater, or runs into it, drains off of it from rainfall and snow melt, collects into the same river or stream or other water body. And so you can think of like one watershed coming up against another, and there's sub basins and there's sub watersheds, but each of us is right now in a watershed. And here where I am tonight in Northeast Portland, I live in the Balch Creek Willamette River watershed. And if you know what watershed you live in, you might type it into the chat. And if you don't, you can now or later when it's convenient to you, I'm sticking a link in the chat, look it up and learn a little bit more about the watershed that you live in, and maybe the watershed where the community with which you organize, or the faith community that you're a part of, the community that you come into this cohort with tonight. What is your community's watershed? Ched Meyer paraphrases Baba Dioum, who is a Senegalese forest engineer, saying that we won't save places we don't love. We can't love places we don't know, and we don't know places we haven't learned. I'm going to stick that into the chat here. Again, this is Ched Meyer paraphrasing Baba Dioum, but he says, we won't save places we don't love. We can't love places we don't know, and we don't know places we haven't learned. So I think the question for us tonight is, how can we come to know and to understand and to love our watersheds, to love and know and listen to our more than human neighbors and the places that we co-inhabit, the waters and the air that we share? And in other words, how can we practice sacred encounter with land? There's two things that I wanted to share about that, two kind of critical components, and then they're not the only ones, but two to share tonight about that practice of land encounter. And the first has to do with how we think about and conceptualize the land, our orientation or mindset, our worldview in relationship to land, which starts in our mind, but I think is fundamentally about our hearts. And then the second is about how we move and act in relationship to and with the land in an embodied sense, as an active practice, our body in physical presence of and connection with the land. But first, so how do we think about or view the land? And Deb, you kind of referenced this in your grounding, that for many of us, and I know for me, I was raised and steeped in this dominant culture that has viewed and then treated land as commodity, as property, as something to be owned, as something to be used and consumed, and most often for our own personal or private benefit. But humans have not always thought of land in this way, and there are many other ways to understand land. And I never tire of listening to the Potawatomi tribal nation member and botanist and storyteller and wisdom keeper, Robin Wall Kimmerer. And I want to just let us listen to her tonight, share a little bit about ways to conceptualize or think about land. LaVeta, we'll do like a 2-minute video clip, and maybe give a thumbs up or in the chat if make sure that we can hear it. LaVeta, I'm not hearing it. Yeah, you might have to reshare.
We have had already. Before we begin, I just want to say that I have news for Richard Branson and his
Oh, can
prize
you
for the
move it
carbon
forward to
sucking
the
gizmo.
8th minute?
And when I found the photo, because the stories of a worldview for the ones below, and two winds, two worldviews met on this continent. Worldviews which color our relations with the living land, which shape our answer to the question of what does land mean? A worldview in which land was understood as sacred, as our sustainer, our pharmacy, our identity, our home, our library, the place where we play out our moral responsibility in return for our very lives, peopled with our non-human relatives. This is a way of being in which the tar sands are unthinkable. This view of the earth suddenly encountered another view, a kind of climate change in values. The whole notion of land as a set of relationships and moral responsibilities was replaced by the notion of land as rights, rights to land as property. And what our people called the gifts of the land suddenly became natural resources, ecosystem services, and capital. Nature as family became nature as machine, and our non-human relatives, our teachers, became mere objects for consumption. This is a way of being that invites us to the tar sands. This is the same question that has us teetering on the precipice of unparalleled extinction and climate chaos. Is the land a source of belongings or a source of belonging? The turbulence of the clash of worldviews spawned the wind that tried to blow away the Potawatomi and propelled the extinction of the most abundant bird on Earth. And we need to remember and name this heartbreak, because that same wind still threatens us all, and its temperature is rising.
Thanks,
And you
LaVeta.
should know that
There. I love that question that she ends on there of what if we understood land as source of belonging, right? And land as home, not only to us humans, but to so many beings. But how do we listen to and invite relationship with the land? So that might be like, I think what Robin Wall Kimmerer invites us into is that shift in our mindset that I think also impacts our hearts. But what do we do in practice, like embodied ways? How do we listen to the land? And I was thinking about this earlier this week and remembering in my elementary school, we always had science fairs. And I don't know how many of you had a science fair in your elementary school, but in mine, every year there was always that kid who set up the same experiment with the bean plants and some kind of boom box and was trying to answer the question, can plants hear? And are plants going to grow more quickly if they listen to Metallica or to Beethoven, right? To classical music or to rock music? Every year, that same experiment. But in retrospect, I wonder if maybe we got it wrong, and that a better use of our time might have been trying to figure out how we can attune our own hearing and to develop our own listening skills to hear and understand the language and the music of the plants. What are the messages and the stories that the plants, that the land are trying to share with us? And scientists are learning that plants and animals make all kinds of noises that we're only just now figuring out how to hear and detect. And they have these tiny, tiny microphones, digital bioacoustics, that are revealing some astonishing things. There was an article in The Guardian just a couple of days ago, maybe some of you also saw it, where they found out that these Amazonian sea turtles make more than 200 distinct sounds. And whereas scientists used to think that these turtles were totally mute, And what the turtles do, these mothers like climb up, and they, as their babies are hatching, they call to their babies with these noises that we cannot hear, and they guide them to safety and away from predators. And this is some of the first scientific evidence of parental care in turtles, which were previously thought to simply abandon their eggs. But I don't think that we need high-tech microphones to begin the practice of listening to the land and to her stories and to our watersheds and to our more than human neighbors. I think that listening to the land isn't all that different from what we as organizers, as leaders, do when we try to build relationships and organize with our human neighbors. So I want us to take just a second, and we're going to go and do a one-to-one practice in a minute here, but to think about what we've already learned about sacred encounter. Take a second and maybe put it into the chat. What have we already learned about how to invite sacred encounter and to build relationships with our human neighbors? And if you have a word or phrase too, you can also unmute and speak it into this space. Yes, Scott, to be present without agenda. It takes listening. Active listening. We had to be open. We had to open our hearts and be vulnerable. To show up and listen over time. So maybe not just once, but over and over again. But we notice, right? We pay attention to who is in our community, who is in our watershed. We get to know one another through deep listening. We approach with wonder or reverence or curiosity. Yeah, Mira. And we ask each other about our stories, right? Our own histories, our pressures, our dreams. How can we ask that of our more than human neighbors and of the land? And we try to learn about each other's context, right? The people that we love and walk with, the broader systems and institutions that are impacting our community members' lives. There are also systems and institutions impacting the land. What are they? How do we find that out? We also look for intersections, right? About how our stories connect to others. How does the heron story connect to the bald eagle story, connect to the story of Whitaker Ponds? And we invite connection and relationship. Yes, sometimes Paul silence. We spend time together, especially in person, in place, in our bodies. Thank goodness that if not in this way tonight, but in some ways we're getting to do that again. And then we fall in love with each other. And we defend and we protect and we show up in solidarity with each other. That is part of how we invite sacred encounter and build relationships with other humans. And I want us to consider that maybe that is some of the same way that we invite relationship and listen to the land as well. Let's do some practice together. Marianne, will you join me up here? LaVeta, can you spotlight Marianne? Oh, and maybe also put up the Lorax slide. Okay. I don't know if you can do all of those things at once. I can't. But if you can, cool. And if not, maybe some of you remember, my kids love this story. And now there's the movie out about the Lorax, who's this little being, I don't know, funny looking being, who in the story, the Dr. Seuss story, is the one who speaks for the trees. The Onceler is trying to cut down all of the truffula trees in order to make thneeds, these things that everybody needs. And the Lorax is the one who speaks for the trees. Well, tonight we're going to try to speak a little bit from the perspective of some of the lands and places that we love. All right, you can take the slide off now, LaVeta. Thanks for that. So we're going to have a little fun tonight. Also, sacred encounter can be fun. And I want you to think back to the sacred place or land that you named during Deb's grounding at the beginning. And we're going to break into pairs for one-to-ones. But this time in your one-to-one, instead of sharing about your own life or story, you're going to seek to embody and then speak in the voice of the particular place or land, or maybe river or watershed, or maybe just a honeybee, right? Or a particular tree that you named earlier this evening. Or if you want, you can choose to speak from the perspective of the land that your congregation or community belongs to or stewards, or maybe the land upon which you live. And we're going to take turns asking each other some of the same powerful questions that we might use in a one-to-one with our fellow humans. And we're going to see what we can learn about this particular land or body of water or more than human being. And I'm going to stick some of those questions in the chat here that we can you can refer back to when you get into your one-to-ones. But first, Marianne and I are going to model this a little bit. Are you game, Marianne?
Let's go for it.
Okay. And what land or more than human, other than human being, are you going to speak from the perspective of tonight?
I'm going to embody a flowering cherry tree that sits in Northeast Portland.
Okay. Well, beautiful cherry tree. Why don't you start by just telling me a little bit more about the place that you come from, or the places that you call home, have called home?
Well, I was planted here probably 50 years ago in a piece of land between a street that was already here and two houses that were already here. So I sit on a very small plot of land between a street. There's a lot of houses on this street, and I sit in front of two houses. I think that I was planted about 50 years ago, but I don't think I'm native to this part of the world. I think I was brought here from Asia and planted all over this country. But I, now I'm a large tree. I'm probably 40 or 50 feet tall, and I span a space between two houses that sit behind me and in front of the street.
So a story of migration also in your ancestors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brought here by people from Asia.
Yeah. What are some of the pressures in your life right now? What's happening?
The last few years have been very hard. Lots of changes in weather. I'm used to pretty temperate climates and a lot of water. I've thrived in certain parts of the world for a long time, but things are changing. There's much hotter weather. There's droughts. There's rainfall that's more than I'm used to. There's ice storms and wind. That's been really, really challenging. And because of that, I think I'm dying. And it's really hard to accept that. But the humans that I share this land with have decided that it's no longer safe for me to live here anymore. A few months ago, a part of my trunk fell into the yard, one of the yards that I live in. It fell in the middle of the day on a day that had no stormy weather, no wind, no ice, no snow, and I collapsed. And the humans who live close to me have decided that it's no longer safe to have me living here. And so I think they have decided they're going to remove me. So.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's you're in a moment, a liminal moment. I also want to ask, even in the midst of that, are there things that are bringing you joy and life these days?
The rain, definitely the rain. It's such a nice time between the heat of summer and the ice of winter, the rainfall.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this time. And I hope I can come and sit under your branches while you are still there to share them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Marianne.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank
So
yes. Thank you, Sarah.
we're going to go into one-to-ones. Whoa. And invite you again to embody sort of one of the sacred places, maybe the one that you shared about earlier in the grounding, or another piece and part of the land. We'll do that for about 10 minutes. So you'll have a chance to, each of you, to go for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll come back for a little debrief.
I really want to know how everybody here feels about that exercise. So tell me, what was that experience like for you? And just raise your hand. Jake's gonna watch. I know there's more than one screen. I'm only watching one, but I'd like you to just raise your hand and we'll call on you. And we'd like to have you just share briefly what that experience was like for you. So anybody, was it hard?
Well, I guess I can share. Yeah, it certainly was. It pulled me out of my comfort zone. I'm just not creative in that way, or at least not naturally. So it really pushed me to really think and in a new way than I normally do. Instead of looking at it, looking from it was
Yeah.
a bit different. But I was matched with Bob, and just he went first and provided just a wonderful model, and I was able to live into the creek that he was talking about. Seemed much more real to me because of the way he was telling it from that perspective. So it was really meaningful.
Thank you. Great. What about somebody else? Anybody else want to share with the group? It sounds like for Dawn, it was challenging and meaningful. What about somebody else?
Well, I enjoyed talking with Don. This is Bob. And one of the things that came up for me is because I have a relationship to the land that's extremely important to me. And it was very interesting to be connected there but in addition to being connected with people and with some of the issues that we've been dealing with over the last while now. So having that land connection was very actually moving to me. So.
Okay. So Kelly, I hear you have your hand up.
Yeah. Katie and I turned out to know each other's places. One was in Southeast Portland and one was in North Carolina.
Oh,
And
interesting.
the land connected us.
Amazing. That's an experience that we maybe didn't anticipate when we put this activity together. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it was organic. It just happened.
Yes.
And we went with it.
Okay. Well, here's Scott. Do you want to share?
Sure. I think the role playing and being the giant sequoia that I visit over on Southeast Hawthorne, 55th and Hawthorne, it really put it in my body instead of in my head about reflecting upon what this tree has seen in 150 years, all the changes it's seen, all the pressures it's experiencing now, and yeah, got it into my body instead of just in my head. So very useful for that. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else? Anything surprise you about this activity?
Marianne, I appreciated your story. It almost brought me to tears. So thank you for that work you did.
Well, it's brought me to tears too in the last month or so. So, did other people have the same experience as Scott did, where it moved you from being in your head to experiencing things in other ways? I see Deb nodding her head. Do you want to share, Deb?
I just think that we have such a hard time even being in touch with our own bodies, and embodying our own stories and feelings. And it's almost like putting my mind into a bee and then having the Salish sea that I was connecting with, that you fall more deeply in love.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it felt to me like. Wow. And I'm just thinking too about how we don't go to the feelings, and it helps to embody the pieces of nature that we are in love with.
Yeah. Thanks, Deb. Well, I know that we have other things to share. So thank you so much for sharing how you felt about this one-on-one. And I'm going to hand it back to Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. LaVeta, if you want to pull up that last slide on learning and unlearning and discerning, just a little like recap, maybe, that in this practice of learning how to listen and listen to the land in a way that invites relationship, here are some things that we might be trying to learn, unlearn, and discern. We might be trying to learn how to listen to and to love and to live in reciprocity with the land. We might be trying to learn what it means to bring a concentric orientation to our stewardship decisions and organizing. And by concentric, just a quick note on that, that's a term from Enrique Salmon, an Indigenous scholar and practitioner, who invites us to understand and bring an awareness that, quote, life in any environment is viable only when humans view the life surrounding them as kin. The kin or relatives include all the natural elements of an ecosystem. So what happens when we see the land as relative? What happens when that's part of our orientation and organizing? And then unlearning, commodification, colonization of land, exploitation, and purely anthropocentric organizing. And we might be discerning, what is the story that this land is wanting to share with us, the land that we steward in our communities, perhaps if we do have land that we are stewarding, or the land that we live on. And to what does this story call us as communities and as our core teams and the people we're connected to? But what happens when we move from like a concentric approach or towards a concentric approach in our organizing, and how might our organizing change if we start to consider and make those decisions based not just on the boundaries of the specific tracts of land that belong to us and our congregations, but also based on the watersheds to which we belong, for example. And I want to invite Jake up to share a story of how in the organizing, listening to the land and getting to know a place actually really transformed their plans for what to do and the actions they took.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jake Bailey. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the heartbeat holder out in Washington County. And I've been asked to share with you a story of where land has shaped the trajectory of one of our organizing projects. And I feel really honored to be able to share this with y'all today, because I don't really feel like I was a part of the making of this so much as a witness to it. But I'm now very intricately tied as a part of that story. You see, I was brought into an affordable housing project a few years ago that is currently trying to develop 170 plus units of affordable housing on Presbyterian land. And I was brought into this project a few years after its initial dreaming and conception. A developer, architect, and contractor had already been chosen. And I was getting brought into this meeting as the heartbeat holder out in Washington County because this is where this was taking place, right at a pivotal moment of the project. And I remember this was one of my first meetings with them, if not the first. And my coworker, who had been working on this project for quite some time, mentioned to me that there had been a wrench thrown into our plans. That our original plan for utilizing the entirety of the property for human-centric housing and needs might need to change, because after 3 years of dreaming, when we actually encountered the land on a deeper level through a land survey, we learned that about half of it is protected wetland. She mentioned this to me because we didn't know how the human stakeholders in the Zoom room that night were going to react or respond. That our plans and dreams that we had been developing together for 3 years, contingent on this human-centric vision, might be called into question and need to change. So in essence, my coworker was preparing me to placate, or to put people at ease, or to ask deeper questions of the room. And so I got into the room and was so pleasantly surprised when this news was immediately accepted. And it wasn't accepted because it would be cheaper or because development fees and timelines would have to be backtracked. But because we really wanted to honor the land that it was on. I feel really pleased to be a part of a team that has unwavering support and is so attuned to the non-human stakeholders of the space we share. And I share this because it is amazing how much work had to go in to be prepared to receive news like that. That all of these systems of white supremacy and capitalism and all these systems work together so that we can't even receive news like that. And so this is so, and all these encounters that we do are interconnected with one another. And this is actually how it can manifest in the real world of our work. And it wasn't until after we had that encounter that we learned, or more specifically, I learned, that wetlands are among the most biologically diverse ecosystems on Earth. Not only that, but they purify our water and our air, ridding them of pollutants, and they mitigate climate change and act as carbon sinks with some of the plant life that they host there. And so I'm very, like I said, very honored to be a part of a project that holds this as integral to the story and that taught me how to do that, where I was even coming into this with human-centric values of having to mitigate people, when in reality, they were ready to receive the land. And so that's what it can look like in the real world. And I'm actually going to use this as an opportunity to invite you all to have a sacred land encounter with what I just told you about, this affordable housing project out in Aloha, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday from 1 p.m. to 2:30. There, we're going to be telling this story in a little bit more detail, encountering the land that made all of this possible, as well as dream together what this is going to look like in the future, both from our human and non-human stakeholders. It's going to be at Hazeldale Park. That's right next to the location that we will be building. And there's parking there, but we will send more information to come. And with that, I would like to lead us into some upcoming events and some next steps. LaVeta, if you want to share that slide.
Jake, is
Yeah.
the link that I put in there related to that, or is it related to something different?
That is related to something different.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No worries, but we will get there in just a moment.
Okay. All right. Give me a minute to get the slides up. Go ahead and talk.
No worries. As a reminder, we will not be meeting again until January on that first Thursday. That will be a January 5th at 6:30. It will be the same link and same time, but please do register. Knowing who's going to be in the room helps us craft our agendas and cater everything to y'all. What LaVeta threw into the chat there is a registration link for an event that is happening this Sunday from 3 to 6 p.m. Out of some of our learnings and listenings, we have found that NIMBYism can be a huge impact on some of the things that we want to get done. And so this Sunday, we're hosting a Countering NIMBYism jam session. So if that is something that interests you or you think that will benefit the work that y'all are working on, then please follow the link that LaVeta threw into the chat and go ahead and register for that. As I just shared, the Farmington Road Land Horizon Action will be the following Sunday. So the information is there and we'll follow up more on that. And finally, an Asylum Seeker 101 gathering. We are noticing that throughout our area here in Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties, that a large number of asylum seekers are facing a lot of barriers between finding housing, finding place, and finding belonging here. And so if that is something that interests you, we'll be hosting an informational session on December 14th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. at Gethsemane Lutheran Church. So put that on your calendars. And last but not least, Sunday, February 26th, please throw that date into your calendars. We will be having a big assembly, and that is all I can share for now. But we will have more information to follow, but we do want everyone, if you're able, to be able to participate in that. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Sarah Lose right now, who is going to lead us in something that we can do to support our friends out in East County. Sarah?
Yes, thank you, Jake. LaVeta, if you can put us on gallery view. And we're going to do this really quickly, and we might do it again later. Wait, am I talking about the right thing? Jake, are we doing
Yes.
the Casa Común thing now?
Casa Común photo,
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay, here's the deal. Jasmine, can you give a shout out? Say hello. And Mira, our friends from Casa Común.
Hola.
Hello. Our friends from Casa Común have been organizing in El Rancho, which is a mobile home community in Northeast Portland in the Collie neighborhood, and are on the cusp of some big actions to defend their rights and to their homes in Northeast Portland. And so tonight, did I lose connection?
You're here.
You can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
So tonight, what we want to try to do is just send a little message of solidarity to them in our recording here. And we'll slice out this part of the video to share with them as a word of support as they prepare to submit a letter to the owner of this mobile home park with some of their demands for their justice and their for justice and for their dignity to be respected. So I'm going to put into the chat a message, and first I'll ask somebody to read it in English and then somebody else to read it in Spanish while we send messages visually of support and love. So you could do a little heart with your hands, you could hug yourself, you could wave, whatever looks like love and support and solidarity to you. And in the future, we look forward to sharing more from Casa Común and having the Casa Común core team tell us more about the organizing. But for tonight, we're just going to record this little video for their team, okay? So can I get a volunteer who's willing to read the message in English? Maybe one of our heartbeat holders.
I got you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jake. Okay.
Yep.
And then somebody who's willing to read it in Spanish. Okay, I can do it in Spanish. All right. Let's make sure we're on gallery. Okay. All right. Show us your messages of love and solidarity. Okay, Jake, you're on.
Hey, everyone from El Rancho community. We are from the Levin Community Land and Housing Coalition and many faith and justice communities in Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties. We just want to let you know that you are not alone. There's a large community of us here that supports you and is ready to show up in solidarity alongside you as you keep fighting for change, your rights, and for justice. We are a big community, and together we know that we can change these systems. So we're thinking of you.
Hola a todos y todas y todes de la comunidad del rancho. Somos de la coalición de Levin y de muchas comunidades de fe y de justicia en los condados de Multnomah, de Washington y de Clackamas. Y solo queremos que sepan que no están soles, que hay una comunidad muy grande que los apoya, que no tienen que tener miedo para seguir luchando por los cambios, por sus derechos y la justicia. Somos una comunidad grande y juntos, juntas, podemos cambiar los sistemas. Adelante y les animamos mucho en su lucha. Estamos con ustedes. Okay. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, everybody. More to come.
A perfect reminder that one, we are not alone and that we can't do it alone. So we appreciate y'all taking the time to show our support for those who we may or may not know, but who are fighting for justice all across where we live. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Cheryl, who is going to lead us into some evaluation before we close out the evening.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Lorman, and I'm a member of the Levin Community Cohort in Northeast Portland. I'm here to lead an evaluation. So this is an opportunity for us to reflect collectively on our experience tonight and to create future experiences that are effective and inspiring for our work in the world. So my first question is, what went well tonight? What did you appreciate? What, yeah, so please enter that in the chat and then I'll read a few of those. For me, it was just really good to see everybody for the first time or again. So really appreciated the one-to-one with Diane and Mary's story was very moving. Enthusiastic presenters, thank you. Irvin. We'll talk about the bees and the trees. Again, the Sarah and Marianne's one-to-one, another big hit. Embodying the experience of a non-human being where I live. Cool, thank you. Okay, the next part of this is, what feedback do you have? What is something that you would like to see happen in these forums? What are some potential changes that might improve the experience or help your work? Help you to feel more grounded or heard or connected? What are some ideas you have? I think I went a little fast. There's still positives and coming in, not that it's all positive, you know. So some things that worked well, the story of Farmington Road. Yeah. Any other feedback that you think might improve your experience? I think it's pretty well done. I think there's not a lot of holes, but if there is something that you might, that comes to mind, even later, you know, let us know. Yes, keep the creativity as part of the experience. Yeah. Oh, remember to speak slowly for all languages, especially our interpreters. Yes. I feel like I need that written on my computer next time. The variety and the pace was good. Okay. Maybe we're ready for the last question. It's kind of related to the first, but so maybe if there's something that you wrote down or circled or starred in your notebook or in your heart, something that new that, or something that you learned that was new, a new experience, or something that confirmed something you already knew but reminded you, or what kind of awakened in you tonight as part of this experience together? I think for me, I'm always reminded about how important it is to have a one-to-one conversation. Like you can not like it maybe because you're an introvert, but Every time I do it, I feel a lot, I feel more alive than I did before. So yeah, here's some things that are coming in that land is sacred and a reminder to connect to your watershed. We belong to the land and each other. Land is not a source of belongings, but of belonging. Thank you, Chris. What is the story that the land is wanting to share with us? Well, that was profound for me too. How might we think of the legacy of youth through the lens of the need to respect the potential legacy of new trees that will take a long time to grow? Thank you. I was reminded that connection to the land takes continuous practice and tending. Thank you, Scott. We won't save places we don't love. I was reminded that connection to the land takes continuous practice and tending. Thank you, Scott. Did I read that one already? All right. So I think, thank you for this evaluation and for your contributions to it. There's an announcement here. I feel like we're way ahead of schedule, but if you'd like time with your core team to gather at 8 p.m. or in the next few minutes, LaVeta has created a room for you to gather. So please look for your team name and join in that room.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Looks like we're about 5 minutes early, but feel free to see yourself out. And we are so excited to see you either this Sunday, hopefully, as well as a few more times, but if not, in the new year. So be well.